Hello again. The Practical Animal Channel is dedicated to the public understanding of conservation. It does this by reaching out to interview conservationists. These videos are their stories and showcase what they do and the skills with which they do it. Through these recorded interviews, they highlight where our knowledge gaps lie and suggest projects for students. Today's guest is an expert on turtles. Frankie Hobro is a trailblazing turtle conservationist, director of Anglesey Sea Zoo, creating Britain's only turtle rehabilitation centre. I began by asking her what jobs there are with turtles, ending with suggestions for conservation projects. Globally, jobs include rescue, rehabilitation and breeding projects at one end of the spectrum and turtle farming at the other. What jobs are there working with turtles?
Currently in the UK, there's a very small amount of turtle rescue work with places like us when we have a turtle. It's very intensive work when we have it. But the best way to get really good hands-on experience working with turtles, with sea turtles, is to go on one of the kind of conservation projects. There's a lot of very, very good long-term conservation projects where there are breeding populations of turtles. And that's the work that I did myself with the hawksbill turtle, which is critically endangered, of course.
Frankie, what do you do with turtles?
My job, tagging turtles, taking absolutely all the information that we could from every turtle when she came up, because obviously it's females that you get the information from. It's adult females that we have pretty much all our information on for turtle populations, and getting really, really important data on all of those in order to help protect not just that species, but other turtles. We've progressed massively now with other similar projects for other species all over the world. A really good example is the Kemp's Ridley turtles in Texas. Very recently come back to working with, since I've been in the UK, suddenly getting back to turtle work. So they've managed to use some of the techniques that we've gathered to reintroduce a Kemp's Ridley breeding site in Texas, which is incredibly important and very exciting as well. So when I bought the business here and established it as a, it's a conservation centre, really. It's an aquarium, but really we're a conservation centre. We're all British, which makes us totally unique. Public engagement, education, conservation, sustainability, leading by example, all this kind of thing. Experience I had from previous populations, particularly the critically endangered species, was really, really useful, because we've now had 3 turtles of 3 different species that have been cold stunned very, very locally here in Wales. I've taken them on here with my team. When we got the first turtle, who's still a record-breaking turtle, she's still the only ever example of an olive ridley turtle anywhere in Great Britain and Ireland. And we have records going back to 1748. So, really incredible. It's total serendipity right at the bottom of our drive on the Menai Strait, found by a guy walking his dog. And at the time, I had a lot of experience working with turtles, but not a turtle that's basically dead. And my staff, none of my staff had ever seen a turtle, so for them, this was incredibly, what an opportunity, exciting, and they really, really threw themselves into it. And so, that's the kind of route that we've ended up taking with turtles now here at Anglesey Sea Zoo. So we're suddenly seeing more incidences of turtles being washed up, which are revivable, that we now have a team who are, experts in the UK at reviving and rehabilitating, cold stranded turtles.
Frankie, what are your goals and mission over at the Anglesey Sea Zoo with the turtles? Are you going to be developing a conservation project, a rehabilitation centre, a hospital? How do you see it developing?
Yeah, so we are currently fundraising to build a turtle rescue and rehabilitation facility. There isn't one in the UK, so it would be the first purpose-built rescue and rehab centre for cold stranded turtles. We know it's needed because we've had 3 ourselves. There are more and more instances of turtles being washed up cold stranded. You keep them in very specific conditions. So you don't put them in an aquarium on public display. They're not allowed to be on public display. They have to be kept ideally on their own in a tank, so they're not, also habituated to humans. We want to avoid that. But as much as possible, creating a situation where they can still, sort of forage in a natural way and have a natural diet and rebuild their strength ready for re-release. As an aquarium, we're an all British aquarium, so we have cold water, so we don't have warm water species anyway. And yet it's a wonderful opportunity for people to learn about these animals while they're being rehabilitated and learn about why it's important that you save even each individual and the species as a whole, and how important it is to get them back in the wild. As an example, how to rehabilitate future Kemp's Ridley turtles. We're developing this expertise as we go along every time we have a different turtle here.
Frankie, what skills and expertise does a person need to work with turtles?
You need to be out there and in the field, and there's nothing glamorous about wrestling a turtle on a beach when it's on its way back down into the sea. They're really knackered. They've spent 2 hours like nesting, laying their eggs or whatever. They just want to be back in the sea, and you've got to try and stop this. Some of them are like 40-50 kilos, huge things, and that you're trying to grab hold of just to like check tags or tag them, measure them, get all the kind of data that you need. And these animals do not want to be stopped. They're like little bulldozers, and they just keep going, and they'll spin around and they'll throw up sand at you, and they have this way of they lift their flippers, so they crush your hands between the carapace and their flippers to try and make you let so incredibly strong and very, very determined animals. You get people coming out of university and they read all about stuff and they talk to people about it, and that's fine. But what you need to do is actually get in there and do this kind of stuff. The really important thing is this kind of global communication. There's always somebody out there who can give you the information that you need. You need to be able to ask people. It's not just about writing things down and observations. It's about, how you respond to those observations. And you can think of like every pound as, an endangered animal, if you like. And it's exactly the same thing. You're looking at what's coming in, what's going out, what's changed, what's my problem here, what's going to happen if I don't find out whatever I need to change or what I need to improve. So an awful lot of this kind of work really is being open to get advice from other people and adapt it, see what works and what doesn't, and try and work out why it doesn't. And you're then armed with an awful lot of information, not just on what you've done that time and what the other alternatives were and what else could have worked, but also with how this can be adapted for other animals in similar situations, or slightly different turtles in this example, and you can then collaborate with people elsewhere in the world who are doing this kind of stuff. It's about collaboration and data sharing and information sharing, which is really, really important in the world of conservation, particularly with these species, like I say, which are rescued here and can't stay here. They don't belong here. So you have to be working with the communities, the organizations where these animals are going to look at how best to send this animal over there, adapt this animal, where's the best place to take it.
Frankie, how do you look after a turtle in captivity?
So there are stages to the turtle rescue and rehabilitation process. Obviously, when you get the turtle, so when the turtle is actually physically washed up on the beach, that turtle is extremely dehydrated, malnourished, very, very hypothermic. So basically, you've got an animal that's effectively dead. And the really critical thing is getting to that turtle as quickly as possible, because if it isn't dead, then it is very likely that it's revivable. And every hour makes a lot of difference in that respect. In the initial stages, we don't put turtles in water. That's the big, big no-no. If you warm them up too quickly, they will die, because they've got this very, very tiny little core temperature, which remains consistent. And if it very, very gradually increases, we're talking 1 degree a day, literally. And then after a week, you can increase to maybe 2 degrees a day. Any faster than that, you could lose the turtle very quickly through shock. Obviously, turtles breathe air. And if you've got a turtle that's in that poorer condition, it can't actually lift its head to breathe properly. So it will drown. If there's any water in there, its head will be under the water and it will drown. So we just use a damp towel. We built an incubator. So we leave the turtle in there. We maintain the temperature by 1 degree higher than it was when that turtle was on the beach for the first day. And then we increase it by 1 degree per day, and absolutely no food, just observations. We'll give fluids for rehydration as well. After a few days, we'll take bloods because we want to try and make sure, we need to know if there's anything serious in the way of, particularly pneumonia or any lung damage. And after a week or two, then you can start putting a small amount of water in the tank, just a little bit to help maintain the body temperature. You can get the temperature up to, by 2 degrees a day then after a week or so, up to what their optimum temperature is in the wild. And of course, that varies a lot depending on the species. What you're looking for is the first poo, as we say. It's like being a parent, a true turtle parent, right? Because that shows you that their metabolism is back to how it should be. It also shows you, of course, that there's no blockage. Once they've done that first poo, that's fantastic, because then we can start looking at introducing food, putting a little bit more water in the tank, and then we're properly on the road to, rehabilitation and release. Actually, we are physically going in and checking on that animal every 1 to 2 hours, 24/7.
What advice can you offer somebody wanting to do what you do?
Yeah, so the advice is go out and get as much experience as you can with as many different species of turtles or terrapins or tortoises or whatever that you can, because it's all very, very valuable. Don't expect to get paid for that experience. If you do, it's great. Don't expect to earn an awful lot of money very quickly, or possibly even ever, if you're into this kind of conservation zoology work. It's a lifestyle. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's about taking any opportunities that come up.
Frankie, how do you see turtle conservation 10 years from now?
Fantastic to see places like, for example, having just been out to Texas, how engaged the local communities are. The public engagement is incredible, but it's really, really, really important for future generations, for going forward, to get that kind of public engagement. If you haven't got that community engagement, then you won't succeed with the work that you're doing. Where we're the sort of specialists in what we're doing with turtle rehab, we're still hoping to build a proper facility. Going forward, we want to get a proper sort of phone line, if you like, to report turtle strandings. We need to get the message out there for people to look out for turtles, make sure they know exactly what they do, i.e. call someone in to come and, immediately, check on that turtle. And we need that more and more now, because we are seeing more turtles on our beaches. And as a result of that, we're going to have more stranded turtles which are revivable on our beaches. Our sea temperatures at the moment, we measure every single day all year round here at the Sea Zoo. In the summer, our sea temperatures are coming in at 18 degrees. So we are seeing juvenile loggerhead turtles more and more commonly quite close to shore in the UK. These animals are coming closer, and it's similar for Kemp's Ridleys. Conservation efforts, there's a lot more juveniles out there. We've got this exponential graph that shows, that numbers of all species of turtles, incidences of turtles being cold stunned, are increasing year on year, and have been doing over the last sort of 10 years, particularly. We know that this is because of changing ocean currents, increasing sea temperatures, combined with these kind of mad storms that we're getting in the Atlantic, the sudden mixing of the kind of Arctic water with the warmer Gulf Stream. And as a result, then turtle conservation on the sort of, the turtle rescue side, like we're doing, has started to take off. And at the moment, there isn't any dedicated turtle rescue and rehabilitation facility, which is why we're now looking at building one here, because we know there is a need for it. We need a proper facility here to continue what we're doing in the future. There's a whole change in the sort of temperatures of the ocean around the UK, and that's bringing the sort of closest turtle species within our range. Yeah, so we're fundraising at the moment for a rescue centre, but we've actually been doing this work already for 7 or 8 years. So in 2016, we got our first turtle washed up. She was an olive ridley turtle. No one in the UK that had ever had an olive ridley before. So she was the first of her species ever since records began in 1748. But, it made us realise how difficult it was to sort of compile all the information that you need, but how important it was to just do what we could do. We adapted our own facilities for that turtle. When we then got the Kemp's Ridley turtle, our second turtle, which was actually November 2021, so almost 2 years ago now, we knew what we had to do, and very, very gradual increasing in temperature, 1 degree a day, and then you go up to 2 degrees a day once you get into kind of the teens, very close monitoring, no water, and then introducing water. We can do it because we've got, well, I say the staff, my team are fantastic. And what I love is that they're very keen to learn hands-on. They're very keen to, put the extra time and effort in. We would be able to do so much more, so much better if we could have a proper facility in place. And we know now what we need from our own experience, but also from, you know, speaking and visiting other places which have these kinds of facilities. And so we know exactly what we need to build to make the process much more efficient, much safer for the animals, and also, you know, cheaper to run. So the beauty of that means that we can have several turtles here at one time without, you know, being overstretched with staffing or utility costs or anything like that. So we need an insulated room. We need a proper purpose-built incubator unit, which allows us to maintain optimum temperature and change it, or, you know, up it by a degree a day, for example, without having to physically come in and check it and open and shut it. And then we need a sort of, you know, a pre-release tank, which can be adapted for different temperatures, different depths, depending on, you know, ideally 2 of those, depending on which species we've got and what its particular needs are pre-release. And most importantly to me, a way that allows us to engage the public. So when we have these animals that are rescued that are, you know, going back into the wild, there's absolutely no doubt they're going to be, you know, re-released where they should be re-released. And particularly in the case of critically endangered species, you know, in the way that we know will be most beneficial to the future of the species as well as that individual. But while we've got those turtles in our care, it's a wonderful opportunity for public engagement, because a lot of people never see turtles. We believe in being kind of trailblazers with this kind of thing. We see a need for it.
I know that you're an expert, Frankie, with global experience. And, you know, one conservationist told me a couple of years ago, nothing beats boots on the ground in conservation, meaning nothing beats experience. How well is your project supported in terms of veterinary support?
We have found a very good vet who's very into her kind of reptiles and things, and she's our kind of turtle vet now, you know.
Frankie, how do you see turtle conservation changing over the next 10 years?
We will get to the stage where they are in a lot of the states where people are starting to actually look for cold-stranded turtles. They'll recognise, you know, what they need to do, i.e. call quickly, get someone to come and collect them. But hopefully also we'll have that public engagement, because that's really, really important.
Is there anything that becomes routine with their care? Can they receive vaccinations every 3 months?
Once you've got a turtle that's recovering and you've got it in the right kind of temperature in its, you know, long-term pre-release tank, it becomes fairly routine. But we make sure that we, you know, weigh and measure the animal, and things like feeding. So, you know, we'll try a lot of different foodstuffs. We've found that certain species prefer certain kinds of foods. We make sure we weigh what goes in and we weigh what comes out. You know, we make sure that we set the routine with the heat lamps, for example, and the UV lights, so that we're recreating the sort of diurnal day patterns and things.
Frankie, what's your best turtle fact, please?
Turtles evolved obviously from turtles on the land. So turtles can survive out of the water for quite a long time because they breathe air. So long as the temperature is maintained, then they can survive outside water for a long time. And a really cool fact about turtles in Britain, you know, people don't realise that we have had native turtles in Britain for decades, but they were only declared in the late 1980s. And it all goes back to what they call the Harlech turtle, right? So this is the largest individual turtle that's ever existed in the world, ever. And it was washed up in Harlech, which is about 20 miles south of here at the Anglesey Sea Zoo. And unfortunately, it was dead when it was found because it had drowned in fishing lines. But they stuffed it and kept it in the Natural History Museum in Cardiff. And we have a life-size model of it here, which is probably one of the most highly photographed statues anywhere, because everyone that comes gets a photograph of it and posts it online. But the idea of it is just to educate people about the sheer size of these things. So it was about 3 meters long, right? So this is the size that leatherback turtles are. The leatherbacks that have been declared as a result of this turtle being found and the research for a few years after, they've now been declared native because they're here for at least half the year. And they come here to feed on these huge jellyfish that we get offshore. So we don't really see them much close to shore. They're very, very hard to find, because obviously if they see someone coming, they tend to dive down, they hold their breath for a long time, dive very deep. But they are there and they are native. So we do actually have native turtle species, and not just any turtles, these incredibly big turtles, leatherback turtles. And they come here to feed on these massive jellyfish that we get offshore.
Have you ever come across a situation where people get so emotional about the work that you're doing, the rehabilitation work, the rescue work, the turtles in captivity being treated, do they ever get emotional about it? Does that ever get in the way of the work that you're doing?
But emotions definitely can get in the way. I've seen it happen with individuals, and it can be quite difficult. It can sometimes be quite detrimental, because we actually struggle here sometimes with even organizations in that respect, because there's a lot of organizations who are absolutely anti-captivity, full stop. And I very much I very much support the anti-captivity for large animals, turtles, whales, dolphins, all that. Completely agree with it. But at the same time, when you're working with critically endangered species in a captive situation to re-release animals, to re-establish populations, like we're doing with our seahorses, with our turtle rescue, you can't do it without having animals in captivity. The fact that we've got wild turtles that we're rescuing for re-release, but we know what works because other places are doing it. And the bigger picture to that is, you've got an animal that's going to be released to the wild. You have to keep that animal in isolation, and you have to keep it in a way that means it doesn't get too accustomed to humans, that it can forage on its own. And so people don't always see the bigger picture, and they can be quite quick, I think, sometimes to sort of be emotional or opinionated over things. And I think it comes back to what I was saying about being a little bit humble and accepting sometimes that people might have a lot of knowledge and experience in this.
How do you deal with the emotions when it becomes, when it's either your own or volunteers or at an organizational level?
We're working, we are only doing things because we know that it's the right thing to do for the right reasons, in the right way, because we've consulted people who can tell us that. The best thing you can do is not let the distractions cause distraction, and just, keep down the path of doing the right thing.
Is there anything that you can train turtles to do? And if so, in what context?
They don't have any natural fear of humans, because in the wild they have no reason to fear humans. They are fairly easy to become kind of trained or habituated, but without that being detrimental when they're released. So with an animal that isn't going to be in captivity forever, I don't think it's necessarily a huge problem if you're doing that in the right way for the right reasons. It's more of an issue when you've got animals that are in long-term or permanent captivity, because you have to be able to, as you say, animals that you wouldn't normally be able to get close to or handle, you have to have a means of doing that. And so you have to then train them so that they'll allow you to get close enough, or let you, I know with sea lions, for example, so you can open their mouths, look at their teeth and that kind of thing. So you do have to have that kind of training in place, I think, for certain animals in that sort of situation.
Frankie, is there any particular area where there is a gap in knowledge, or could you perhaps recommend a research project for somebody who wants to, in inverted commas, get into turtles?
Yeah, do you know what? In my opinion, there's a massive gap in knowledge in the UK between everybody and the marine environment, and we're always trying to fill that. And this is what's wonderful with the sort of, they're sort of a decade or two ahead of us in the States and other places with this, because they have this public engagement and they have everybody's understanding and everybody's involvement. And you have to have that to make this kind of thing succeed. It would be really, really useful to see, how different conditions that they're kept in and different diets in captivity during, rescue and rehabilitation, how they affect survivability in the wild. Because of course, we really only get a snapshot with turtles. We see them, possibly in the nest, as eggs, and we release hatchlings or see hatchlings releasing. And then we basically have healthy adult females, and that is our sample, because those are the only animals that regularly come up that we can monitor. And so there's this enormous gap. We don't know much about males. We don't know where they hang around. We only starting to learn about breeding behavior. We suspect that the males come and kind of hang around just offshore when the females are breeding, because that's the best time to bump into them. We're pretty sure genetically that females can store sperm, which is quite exciting, quite interesting as well. We don't know kind of how long for, whether they can do it across a breeding season or just during. But potentially there's an awful lot that we still don't know about even the more common species of turtles, just because of this sort of gap of knowledge, if you like, of not accessing the animals at that sort of phase of their life cycle, and not really accessing the male animals at all unless they happen to be accidentally caught or rescued. As far as sort of hatchlings and growth goes, really, the most information we have is things like turtle farms in that respect, with things like green turtles, where they do hatch them out and keep the hatchlings and, actively feed them up, to a certain size over a certain amount of time. And so sort of optimum nutrition is a lot more important in that respect. Whereas obviously what we do with rescue for re-release, is that we're trying to make it as natural as possible and allow the sort of foraging behavior and the selection of food as much as we can, rather than trying to kind of feed the animal up.
Is environmental enrichment when they're in captivity a consideration, Frankie?
You know, put my neck on the block here and say turtles do not do well in captivity long term. They don't. I mean, personally, I don't believe turtles should be kept in long-term permanent captivity. And I believe that's the reason they don't do well. So if you keep a turtle in long-term captivity, you have to be extremely careful what you put in the tank with it. We deliberately keep ours in very, very plain tanks, very boring tanks. What we are able to do is put a couple of rocks in, natural rocks with maybe a little bit of natural seaweed, and the live crabs is nice because it's natural foraging. Turtles eat everything. In the wild, they chomp away at coral reefs. You know, they'll have a chomp and a chew on anything and swallow it and spit it out again. And so often you find when turtles are kept in any kind of captivity in an aquarium, they end up eating stuff they shouldn't eat as part of the theming, or food that's been put in there for other animals, or equipment that's been put in the tank. And then they end up having to either be operated on, or you know, they're not releasable as a result. You know, you end up with a turtle that you know, has to then be captive forever. And that's because, you know, they have this curious behavior, but also this instinctive behavior. So anything like that is there to be eaten. And obviously the theming in aquariums is you know, it's artificially produced. You know, so it's very difficult to provide sufficient natural enrichment in the kind of environment where, you know, people want to keep turtles permanently. And really for that reason, that's why I don't believe that they should really be kept in captivity in that sort of a situation.
Frankie, can you complete this sentence for me, please? Turtles are...
Turtles are incredible, charismatic, and incredibly interesting to study and to learn about, because we still have a lot to learn about them. The other thing I love is that they do everything very slowly. They're very chilled, they're very laid back.
It's like my pace of life. Frankie, do you have any advice for somebody wanting to work with turtles?
Yeah, so my advice is get as much hands-on experience as you can, and accept that is likely to be voluntary experience, both on the rescue side and also, you know, on projects where there are turtles breeding. So an awful lot of these projects recruit people seasonally for a few weeks, a few months to, you know, monitor beaches and check nests and that kind of thing. Sometimes a bit of predator control, that kind of thing with it. But unfortunately, you know, you're very unlikely to get paid work doing this kind of thing. And this is, I think, what a lot of people don't realise. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of hopeful that they might find paid work getting this kind of experience, and you tend not to. So obviously I pay my staff are paid now here, but we also have volunteers who aren't. So it's one of those sort of situations where you accept really that with more time and more experience, you get to the stage where you may be able to get paid work doing this kind of thing.
Frankie, you are the director of the Anglesey Sea Zoo. Thank you very much for being on the Practical Animal channel. Frankie Hobro.